Hello and welcome to the Progressive Hub Show. Ryan Black here this week with Ricci Sergienko, an organizer from Los Angeles, and Norman Solomon, national director at rootsaction.org. Let's get right into it. Hunter Biden is pleading guilty to tax evasion misdemeanors and illegal gun possession. My feeling is that the right wing will probably go nuts about this and say that he's going to get off easy. Obviously, he's not having any jail time. I will share this story from CNN, if I can get it up there. Hunter Biden to plead guilty to federal tax charges, strike deal on gun charge, has agreed to recommend a sentence of probation for the 2 counts of failing to pay taxes in a timely manner in 2017 and 2018. Norman, Ricci, thoughts on what this means for progressives? I mean, this is a big, another I told you so for the left. I feel like Biden having more issues, making his campaign even more difficult to win in 2024.
Well, I'd mention that I think there have been 2 major concerns that progressives have had that Roots Action has raised for, a year now about the prospective Biden run in 2024. One layer is that he's not progressive. And in fact, he has done many things on the climate emergency, on economic issues, social justice, labor, that have really undermined progressive positions. So that's one huge thing. The other is that we have the necessity of defeating Republicans next year and keeping the neo-fascist Republicans out of the White House. And on both counts, it's very damaging that it looks like Biden at this point is hotwired to be the Democratic nominee. And I think, as you're referring to, Ryan, this story about Hunter Biden is just going to fan the flames of cynicism and distrust of Biden and implicitly his campaign. And one thing I'd mention is, if you look at right-wing media, they've been going nuts about Hunter Biden for years. And this is just going to stoke their frenzy about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it changes, much strategy, because the right, like Norman said, will just continue to harp on Hunter Biden and what it all means. But those people watching those channels aren't listening to anyone else. So I just think, it also, didn't Joe Biden get his house raided because he had confidential documents hiding? That also happened to Donald Trump. So I think it's more so of like these people are all just kind of doing the same thing and may not be of the highest moral class.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, the big problem for Democrats is conveying, which I think is true, that Trump is way just off the map in terms of his lies about his classified info, and it was sloppy by Pence and Biden what they did with classified documents. It's just that Trump is so much worse on classified documents, which is sort of a metaphor. We know that Biden is on policy in terms of what could be done on social justice and peace and basic environmental protection. He's nowhere near what we need. And then the Republican Party is just even way worse.
Right. Unfortunately, the media hates to focus on policy, and they'd rather do the horse race stuff. And from the horse race perspective, now you can say, well, Trump had documents he shouldn't have had. So did Biden. They're the same thing. Trump's kids are criminals who, Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis. Well, Hunter Biden is a criminal too. And so it's the same. And so, that's the real problem there, is that you have a media who's really unwilling to differentiate the huge differences between Trump's criminality and Biden's, which are both wrong, but there are differences.
I would say the right-wing media definitely tries to have an equivalency, or even to make Hunter Biden and Biden worse. The so-called liberal media is anti-Trump, and they point out, I think correctly, that what Trump has done with classified documents, et cetera, is worse, and that he's a bigger liar.
Right. Well, Biden is still running for president, as we all know. Unfortunately, But there are some challengers now and some new ones, like we talked about Cornel West last week. Norman, I'd love to get your perspective on, should we support the progressive challenges to Biden, or with RFK, the so-called progressive challenge to Biden? What are your thoughts there on challenging Biden from within the party as RFK, or from outside of the party as Cornel West is now trying to do?
I love Cornel West. I don't love that he's planning to run third party, because I think objectively that's going to help the Republicans win the White House. And Cornel has said himself that the choice between the Democratic and Republican nominees in 2020 and 2016 was between neoliberalism and neo-fascism. To say it doesn't matter which, I just think is silly. And so that's where we are. I mean, Ricci, you experienced this in LA. You have a corporate mayor right now, and then you had a fascistic opponent. And when push comes to shove, there is a difference.
Would say the only issue is that Joe Biden just hasn't delivered anything in his 4 years, and so convincing people that that's part of the reason why we were organizing for Don't Run Joe. We know that he's not a good candidate, and I think that Biden and the Democrats have put themselves in a really tough position. Because I think Cornel West is going to go out there and say some things and get a lot of people on his side. And I think that's entirely to blame on Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. And so the electoral results that could come from it, I just think the blame lies completely on the Democrats, and it's going to be, we can't rely on them for anything. It's going to be scary. So,
well, I think that's right, that Biden, the Democratic Party, so-called leadership, and historically neoliberalism has fueled through its willingness to allow and enable more income inequality and not challenging injustice. The Democratic Party hierarchy has fueled the right wing, fueled the Republican Party's appeal. And that's where we are now. So that is the causality, and that's where we are.
I think about for Cornel West, the question is, if he were to run as a Democrat, how would that be beneficial for the left? And I think really the goal would be to get him on a debate stage. Pipe dream, Biden drops out, that's awesome. That would be great. And Cornel is the nominee. That would be great. But even just getting on the debate stage, I think would be key. But it seems like the Democrats aren't interested in that at all. Even with RFK at 20-ish% in polls, depending on what you are looking at, they still don't seem interested at all. Do we think that if Cornel West would have run as a Democrat, do we think he could have gotten to a debate stage, or at the least done better than RFK, threatened Biden even more, scared him more, moved him on policy? What do you think?
As a third-party candidate, there is virtually zero chance that
Right.
Cornel West is going to get on the debate stage, because the Democratic Party and the two parties commission controls those debates. We have an example of Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders in 2016 or 2020 had run third party with the Green Party or whatever, no way in hell would he have ever gotten on a debate stage. And if Bernie had run third party, he would have been an asterisk. He would not have impacted, as he has, profoundly the discourse on the 1% and oligarchy and all the rest of it.
Right. And I think Bernie made a fairly permanent mark on the Democratic Party. And I think we're still dealing with the repercussions of his run in 2016 and 2020, and how the Democratic Party never came to terms with their activist base that really powers them to victory. And now we are dealing with the repercussions of that, of an unmotivated, unenthusiastic, young activist base that just doesn't want to do anything for Joe Biden. And that's allowing Cornel West to run as a Green, and is allowing RFK, despite a lot of like kind of wild, weirdo conspiracy ideas, to rise up in the polls, because there's no one else for people to grab onto, and that's unfortunate.
I'm not entirely sure how RFK is like polling the way he is within the Democratic Party, because but it's just the name recognition, but the anti-vax stuff, and I don't know. I'm just not sure how he's polling like that. And I know there was an article that said he could take the first few states in the primary. I'm not sure how truthful that is. But what a situation we could be in if RFK is the Democratic nominee. I know it's very unlikely, but what if?
Yeah, the polling I've seen indicates that most of his 20% or whatever is based on his name recognition, which is real. We can say it's superficial, but there it is. The phrase voter suppression comes to mind, and in a different sense, the top of the Democratic Party is engaging in voter suppression. Because as you're pointing out, Ricci, a lot of young people and others paying attention feel that they shouldn't go out and vote if they have a choice between Biden and the Republican nominee. And I got to say that hopefully there'll be some discernment about our electoral college system, which is screwed up, we know, but it is a reality. I live in California. Why the hell in the general election next year should I vote for Biden? If I live in Alabama, which it's the flip, it's a red state instead of a solid blue state, again, why would it matter? There's only a dozen to 15 states where I would say stopping fascists requires voting for the Democratic nominee, whoever that is.
Right. I think following up with what you were saying about RFK, I think there is a parallel with DeSantis there a little bit too. There's this hope on the right. You had this hope for like, what if Trump was smart? And that's kind of like what people pretended DeSantis was. And on the left, where RFK is trying to position himself, what if we had an environmental lawyer who was anti-war? It sounds really good. It's just when you actually put those products out on the market and spread them around and people get a taste of them, that they realize like, oh, this wasn't exactly what we wanted. And you see that in DeSantis's poll numbers, and we'll see if RFK has peaked as of now, or if people are so unhappy with Biden that somehow he keeps going up.
I'll believe in RFK's chances when he hires Brianna Joy Gray as his press secretary.
Well, he's hanging out with some of the most right-wing billionaires now and doing joint events with them. And so that says a lot about, he's all over the map, and marches in a Support Israel parade in New York City. He's pandering, he's left, right, center. There was a devastating, terrific article in The Guardian by Naomi Klein last week. And she just actually looked at RFK Jr. And, I think it's a demagogue boilerplate. He's in a template of demagogue. And, that works for pseudo-populism sometimes.
All right. And with us today, we have Mariah Parker, who is a labor organizer in Atlanta, and by night, a Stop Cop City organizer. Welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked.
Yeah. So I assume that people watching this here are going to know a little bit about Cop City in Atlanta, but if you don't, it's a $90 million. I think actually the price may have gone up.
Is it 100? Is it 110? Have they been lying to us for years?
Right. It's a at least $100 million police training facility. It'll take out like 300 acres in the Georgia forest. We also know that this is going to be used to train officers for quote unquote civil unrest. And it comes in reaction to what happened in 2020. We also know that police departments from all around the country, Los Angeles, New York, they will go to Atlanta to train. We also know that the IDF will come from Israel and they will come to Atlanta and train. And so there is, there's so many different aspects to this. And then also As we discussed prior to getting on, I believe that Atlanta is, the epicenter right now for a generational fight. Like, we all have to throw down, and it's so imperative that that we win and that the people of Atlanta win. And they shot towards Agita, a 26-year-old climate activist who had their hands up, seated in their tent, and they lied about the story about it, and they said that Tort shot first when really they friendly fired their own officer, planted a gun, and then 40 plus people have been charged with domestic terrorism, directly, from Joe Biden's DHS memos. And then the Atlanta Solidarity Bail Fund gets raided, and it was potential RICO charges were discussed, and like, this is actual fascist shit. So before we get into it, I just want to ask, how are you doing, and what are the state of things in Atlanta right now?
I'm doing great. We just occupied the city, the municipal clerk's office for like 2 hours this morning. And things like that, just being out amongst the people, being in community and experiencing the creativity and the resilience of this movement has been one of the most inspiring things in my life. I think, as you're describing it as a generational struggle, it's probably be one of the most exciting, exhilarating things I've ever part of in my entire life. So I'm doing great, as much as there are so many setbacks and hurdles and unknown, so many questions, so much danger. At the end of the day, like, I just take a lot of energy from the people out here that are doing the work. So yeah. And I think the vibe in Atlanta right now, people are tired. June 5th, we had a mass mobilization of 1,000 people who went to Atlanta City Hall to give public comment for 15 hours, almost unanimously against this project. Only 4 people out of 15 hours spoke for the project. And so that took a lot of effort. It took a lot of people, staying up until 6 o'clock in the morning for the final vote, et cetera. And then when we lost, it's felt heavy on the heart. And so at the same time, we're engaging in community care. We're trying to lift each other back up, because we got this week of action coming up next week, starting this Saturday. People all across the city, all across Georgia, allies from across the country are coming to Atlanta to help us fight back against the Atlanta Police Foundation. And so I would say we're back in an upswing again of just making preparations for what's going to be a mass gathering, and hopefully an effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all watching from all over the country. We're all, trying to throw down as we can. Here in Los Angeles, we've done banner drops and solidarity actions. And yeah, I hope people can get down there for the week of action in the forest. And I also want to ask, like, what's the state of your city council? How many people are supportive of your efforts, and what kind of relationship is there right now with the people of Atlanta and the city council?
Well, I gotta just tell you a little bit about what happened on June 5th.
Please.
Because coming into it, it was very unlikely we have the votes to kill Cop City. But there was like a brief hope that maybe we can get it sent back to committee where it could quietly die. And so there was pretty much some, like, can I curse on this podcast?
Absolutely.
There was some fuck whereby
sure.
The people who needed to look strong and brave standing against Cop City, but didn't actually want the blowback from the corporations, the Atlanta Police Foundation, for it, could sink their heels in and say, tonight's the night that this dies, knowing that they did not have the votes for that. Meanwhile, standing in the way of like a middle of the road option that could have quietly killed the project over time. Effectively, the votes were split so that the project ended up sailing through with a majority of city council folks in favor. Wordlessly, mind you, did not give any explanation for why, after 15 hours of public comment, they would approve this project. But nonetheless, it has seemed that perhaps we've had some allies. We had a lot of people who ran on the issue of Cop City, that they were going to, they would have voted against the project if they could. The time came for them to actually stand up against the Atlanta Police Foundation, and they caved. And actually just today, it was exposed that a bunch of them were like at a birthday party with like lobbyists from the Atlanta Police Foundation. Like a birthday party, no hate on 1-year-olds, it's not their fault. But it really shows, like, at the end of the day, where their loyalties lie. That they want to sound big and bad when it, it's election time, but then at the end of the day, they're going to cave to the corporations and the police foundation that are behind this project. So the state of things in Atlanta with regards to city council, we don't trust those hoes. Really, at the end of the day, we got two avenues of action that are like kind of fomenting as like, all right, this is how we gonna do it. Direct action has always been critical to the way this movement is operated. We're going to come after, the banks. We're going to come after the insurance companies, the contractors, the corporations funding this. We have, as you said, we have people all across the country, across the world who have been going after these multinational targets to let them know that participation in this project is not acceptable. And we're going to keep doing that. And now we're trying to just go past the city council straight to the ballot box and try to put this question before the Atlanta public in November through like a referendum process to say like, hey, do y'all want us to repeal the lease for this land? Or are you cool with them having a giant military playground out where kids could be learning about the fish in the river?
Right.
What do you think? And we think the majority of people are going to be say like, fuck that. We want our forest back. So those are a couple things that we're trying now that city council has clearly proven themselves untrustworthy at best, but just like actually evil at worst.
It just shows the limits of quote unquote Democratic Party politics and identity politics. Because this is Joe Biden's America. This is you have two Democratic senators in the state. This is a Democratic majority controlled local body. And all of this is still happening under all of that. And so I don't buy the things that they're pushing in regards to, voting for these elected officials will actually change things. So you're trying to go past them. And yet, even with the referendum, you've been met with pushback from the state, and you had to do something today or yesterday that in relation to this referendum, if you could break down for us.
Yeah, so the clerk has been finding every single comma or line off in the petition we submitted for their approval as grounds for rejecting it and saying that, all right, we have to reset it and we have another 7 days to look at the new version you've submitted as a means to stall this. So yesterday morning, we filed a lawsuit against her in her capacity as the clerk and her personal capacity for, effectively it's called a writ of mandamus, where it's calling upon the courts to force her to do her job. So this morning, like I said, we were down to City Hall. We occupied our office for 2 hours, demanding that they, approve the petition, give it back to us so we can start collecting the 70,000 signatures we need to get this on the ballot. And while we were sitting there, she sent me an email like, oh, actually, yes, you cited this code slightly wrong. It might confuse the public. Lady, people don't know about the code numbers. In any case, rejected it again. But nonetheless, we have called upon the courts to force her to do her job properly, so that the people can just decide, so that people can just participate in democracy, which I thought y'all loved. I thought Democrats were all about.
Right. It's wild that the city clerk in their capacity is even, stunting you at this level. And you also have the week of action coming up this weekend, as you stated. Is there any sign of this referendum being able to collect signatures by this weekend?
I'm sure that their hope and prayer is that they can push it back.
Oh, man.
Another 7 days, so that all this momentum that is surging around the week of action to come, like the wave, we missed the wave, and then maybe then they're not able to get their 50,000, the 70,000 signatures. We got 3,000 people that signed up to be volunteers, 2,600 of them in the city of Atlanta. We had 50 people sign up to be neighborhood captains to make sure they've talked to everyone in their neighborhood. There are 60 out of the 200 neighborhoods in Atlanta. So
Amazing.
They can try, but ultimately, the very fact of no matter how you feel about Cop City, you should feel badly about it, you should hate it. But if no matter how you feel about it, why would you not want people to just be able to decide? That the mere the sheer audacity of trying to stonewall a democratic process like this, regardless of how you feel about it, is very, very plainly fascist and should disturb everyone.
It should disturb everyone, and I think that if it happens and they don't get it to you by this weekend, I think it'll just piss everyone off more, and I think that it'll give you all an opportunity to really show and expose what they're doing, and hopefully continue that momentum. I want to talk about a few more things in relation to this, just kind of about the diversity of tactics. I do want to ask you about the labor movement, but first, I want to ask, someone on the ground from Atlanta about the outside agitators thing in the media and how, this movement has really embraced diversity of tactics, and that meaning all the way to direct action and even sabotage and all of that. And I think there's a lot of important lessons. And I'm not even saying that as a means of the length of action that people are taking. I'm saying that as in there is importance in how we move as a movement, and whether people are judging certain actions people are taking, because I know there are people that don't support any electoral action, and any people probably don't support the referendum, but you need to build a movement to stop this shit by any means necessary. And so can you talk about the outside agitators thing and the diversity of tactics?
Yeah, let me start with the outside agitators thing. As you mentioned at the top, in documentation that was, found in open records requests, emails from the city, they themselves have said that over half of the people that are going to be trained at this facility are coming either from outside the city of Atlanta or outside of the state of Georgia. So that, to me, point one, seems like a problem that is originating from outside the state in terms of people coming here to do damage to our community. Secondly, we have to look at the sources of funding for the project. So we're dealing with multi-million, billion-dollar corporations who are stealing those wages off of workers all across the United States, perhaps multinationally. And so the money for the project is also an issue of outside agitators coming in and deciding what projects they want to fund in our community. As well, some geographers at Mapping Atlanta, there's some people that, are university researchers in geography. They actually mapped where the main power brokers in the, in support of the facility live. Yes. Most of them don't live in Atlanta. Most of them don't even live in communities that are majority Black. Most of them don't even live in, they don't live in communities that are working class. They certainly don't live anywhere near the forest. And so again, a lot of the main power brokers for this problem, for this playground, are not from the city of Atlanta. And so we're seeing that a lot of the forces trying to make this happen are far greater in scale than the forces here locally, and they're coming from all over the country. And so similarly, the people on the ground here in Atlanta have cried out help. They've said, we're being ignored, no matter how many hundreds of us there are, no matter how many thousands, no matter how many doors we knock, no matter how many times we call our city council, we're just outgunned. We're literally outgunned when we go march the streets, and there's twice as many police officers as there are protest attendants. When the city hall is flooded with police officers, anytime people come to speak there. So they've called upon their wider networks and communities, folks that would be impacted by the militarization of their police forces that would come here, the people that are being exploited by the corporations that are funding this facility, the people who are going to have to live in a burnt up planet if we don't do something about climate change by protecting the lungs of Atlanta that are being torn down to build this facility. So we're just trying to fight fire with fire, frankly. There is a very robust movement locally that, has been very, very grounded in neighborhood knocking on doors, going to city council meetings for years. So the attempts to try to paint things as, people coming in and stirring up trouble from outside of town is projection on the part of people who want to build cop cities.
Right. And I think it's like people always say, well, don't you try to reach out to your elected officials, and don't you write them? Don't you comment at city council? And it's important for people to do that. So the movement as a whole could be like, yes, this is what we've done, and they still won't listen to us. And then another avenue of action that the movement in Atlanta is taking is bring in labor. And I know that's, part of your day job. And so I wonder if you can break it down for us, how you're bringing in labor in Atlanta and what workers all over the country, how they can contribute.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, a large portion of the Cop City project is privately funded through the Atlanta Police Foundation and donations from corporations that are probably in your own community. Home Depot, Delta, Chick-fil-A, Waffle House, Inspire Brands, which also is like the parent company of places like Dunkin' Donuts, Arby's, Baskin Robbins, Buffalo Wild Wings, stuff like that. So anyone who is being underpaid by any of these corporations right now is paying for Cop City. No matter where you live. If you live in, Edgewood, if you live in, I don't know, Taipei, you are paying for Cop City if you work for one of these corporations because they're not paying y'all.
Right.
Chick-fil-A has been fined tens of thousands of dollars just in the last year alone for abusing child labor, in addition to like wage theft claims. So like the money they're not paying 15-year-olds is going to build Cop City. Delta has just finished like a protracted years-long fight for a new contract that guarantees their employees a cost of living increase. They're literally arguing against paying people enough to live with the inflation so that they can build Cop City. And so what we in like the labor community are trying to do that are aligned with this issue, because not everyone is. Yeah, there's police unions, unfortunately, and makes things complicated. But trying to raise
cops aren't workers. Cops aren't workers.
ACAB, cop unions aren't unions. Very clear. What we're trying to do is raise the consciousness among workers that like not only are they like taking money out of your pocket that you'd be paying for childcare, paying to go back to school, paying to get a car, paying for your mom's like chemo, and they're putting it into policing you and destroying your planet. And how do you feel about that? And a lot of people, frankly, how many people are for or against? A lot of people don't know about Cop City because a lot of people are not super plugged into politics because they're working at Waffle House for 40 hours a week and taking the bus home, which is taking 2 hours. So you right. You have Cop City agitating people around the fact like, yo, how do you feel about like if you had $67 million to improve the city of Atlanta, what would you put it into? And not a goddamn flight attendant or someone working at Home Depot or somebody working at Arby's is going to tell you, you know what? I would love it if the cops had a playground to just killing me at. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants affordable housing. Everybody wants more green spaces. Everybody wants free childcare. So I say all that because we're trying to get more workers kind of conscious to the fact that their exploitation is feeding this militarized beast that's being built in their backyard, and hoping that through that we can start having more people rise up against it. Because right now, frankly, the Labor Coalition, AFL-CIO people in Atlanta have not spoken out against the issue. The Atlanta Police
AFL-CIO can't
building a couple of weeks ago, which is terrifying, and completely unrelated to any of this. Definitely not to keep labor in check or anything like that. But
wait, say that again, please. I'm sorry.
So they, for some reason, opened an Atlanta Police Department substation across the street from the building in which most of Georgia's labor unions are headquartered about 3 to 4 weeks ago. I don't think that's related whatsoever to the fact that more and more progressive organizations and organizations aligned with the working class are speaking out against this problem. Nothing to do with that at all. In any case, the people, unions are workers coming together to decide to struggle against something. And so they're trying to get more people woke up to the fact of this wage exploitation, wage theft, et cetera, going to Cop City, so that people might organize their workplaces to come out and say, yo, we are, we're standing up and making it known that we have a stake in this business and we're not okay with the way that it's being operated to fund oppression. There we go. We got this petition.
Pull this up here. Plug this.
Yeah. So I mean, we're trying to like get labor union members, workers, on board with sending a loud and clear message to the city of Atlanta Police Foundation that we're not okay with the fruits of our labor being reinvested in our oppression. With the hope that as this momentum, climbs, we might have a power at scale to put real pressure on these corporations that are funding Cop City.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone in the labor movement wants to get involved, they can go to laboragainstcopcity.com. And I think, what we're discussing here is that this movement is so intersectional, right? There's the labor, and then there's climate, and there's the anti-imperialist aspect, training foreign militaries, or what people are going to be going to use Cop City for. And the
it just encompasses so many things that I think there are enough people to come together to shut this down. I just think that it's a matter of will for people to actually throw down. And so I know that we're all rooting for you here. And I think there's also just a general, all of that wrapped together is that capitalism could potentially be the problem.
I'm starting to sense that it is the problem. When corporations get to come in and decide what happens to your neighborhood,
right?
The scale of like, just because I have $30 million laying around, I get to say the cops have a playground in the forest your kids used to play in. That capitalism.
And that they have the money to do that, right? And they have this, as you explained, they have the money to do that because they're shortening their workers, they're not sharing in on the profits, and they have the ability to do that. And I think another underrated aspect of it is that these were especially made for to deal with uprisings after 2020, right? That they want to use it as a playground to get used to civil unrest. And so capital and the rich people are concerned about what they're fucking turning our world into. And they're like, wow, people are getting really pissed off at us. Instead of fixing any of these problems, we need to train and militarize our police force. So after the people are so far beaten down, they go out into the streets and to express their displeasure, they have a means to fight back against that.
Or when we start having food riots because the desiccation of our farmlands under climate change has made it impossible. It breaks down our, food supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
We can make sure our bunkers are secure. That's, a little dystopian, maybe a little far off, but it also intersects with the issue of climate change and the unrest that's likely to come from that when people just don't have access to like water. People are, just really in dire straits because the situation we left our climate in.
Yeah, I mean, like these companies, if there is unrest and their storefronts are potentially being damaged, they have already supplied the police with money and training to come protect their property, and that's really part of the reason why the police exist as is to protect property interests of wealthy folks. And then you look at the crossover between the people in power and the wealthy, and it just you start putting pieces together that although the federal government and corporations are so intertwined, it's even happening so far down to the local. And that's why it's so important to organize your local communities, organize your workplace, organize your household, because the most effective change you can have is with people that you're close with and in community with.
Period. Yeah. I mean, one of the most beautiful things about this movement is also how seriously it takes community care. So it's like, organize your knitting circle, organize your soccer team, and not just to like march in the streets, but like make sure that folks have, warm clothes for the winter, go to food to eat, things like food distros and skill shares and things that just make our communities more resilient has been such a beautiful way that the movement has built its own capacity and built our alternative systems to the shitty ones we're describing, so that like, fuck y'all, we can go over here and do our thing because we know how to feed our friends and we know how to keep our friends safe. So yeah, organize everybody, your church choir, your goddamn, I don't know, after school science fiction writing club. I don't give a damn. Organize everybody. We need everybody organized.
Your cipher circles.
Your rap circles. I might know about those once upon a time in my life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I once upon a time I thought you had. Can we not talk about that on here?
No, bring it up. I'm playing. I'm just acting funny yet.
Okay. No, I once upon a time I thought you were bringing out. You're gonna drop some bars coming up, right?
On this podcast?
No, not on this podcast. No.
Tell me about that. No,
yes, please.
I do have a show at the Masquerade coming up. Masquerade in Atlanta coming up with Chris Smalls and Steven Donziger and Marianne Williamson. to raise money for Stevens Diggle Defense Fund and the Amazon Labor Union. It's a part of like a cross-country tour that they're doing. And so, yeah, I do some rap music in favor of liberation on occasion. So
I love it. And what are the odds that Killer Mike comes out in support of Stop Cop City?
I'm gonna say it right now.
Okay.
Killer Mike, I challenge you to a rap battle about our respective positions on the issue of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. We only can laugh about our positions about the training center, but I'm gonna whoop that ass. Let's just say.
Okay. I mean, I'll make sure that we clip that and we get that out there to Mr. Mike. And he has to. His dad is probably going to be trained there, so
his dad will be there. He's holding his hand during the rap.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to plug before the end of this?
Come out to the Week of Action. If you're in Georgia, if you're in the Southeast, if you love the environment and want to see it thrive and the people of Atlanta thrive, June 24th through July 1st. There's actions going on every day. Lots of ways to learn, skills for resiliency, take direct action, support the people of Atlanta. If you're in Atlanta, July 22nd, I'll be at the Masquerade with Stephen Donziger and Chris Moss. And check me out on the internet, Mariah FOR Athens.
Yes. Thank you so much. People, check out the Week of Action coming up. Follow Defend the Atlanta Forest on social media. Also, we spoke about the referendum. You can follow them at Cop City Vote on Twitter and social media. And yeah, tap in by any means necessary. And we are going to be, the whole world is watching. And, honestly, we are behind you, and I really hope, and I know you all are putting in the organizing work and understand that, but you all feel that it is such a big thing, and you're not wrong about that. It is a huge thing, and we appreciate everyone that's throwing down in the way that they are. And this will, set examples for the future. If the fucking state and capital win, they're building cop cities everywhere. They're charging everyone with domestic terrorism. They're going to target bail funds. This is their plan, right? But if the people win, you all will have inspired so many people to fight like you have.
We're going to win. Stop Cop City. Cop City will never be built. Never built.
Stop Cop City.
Bernie Sanders has reintroduced, along with other senators, has reintroduced Medicare for All legislation again, as they do pretty much every year. Now, there's no way it's going to pass, obviously, or probably even get voted on. And Biden, of course, doesn't support it. But is it still important to do this every year? I mean, for progressives, is it still important for us to see, all right, who is supporting it, who is not? Where are the pain points? Where do we still need to do work? Or is this really just like a fundraising scheme for them? I don't know, because it's obviously not going to pass. What is the point of this legislation? Norman, what are your thoughts? Do you think this is a good idea to just keep reintroducing it?
I think it's worthwhile. As you point out, it's not going to pass. And if it did by some stroke, and of course the Republicans in the House would never allow that, Biden wouldn't sign it. I mean, that's really clear from the positions. And we've seen even the efforts to talk about the so-called public option. Then Biden retreats from that, which was just a part-way measure anyway to offer some less exploitive options from insurance menus for people. So this is an ongoing injustice, and the United States standing almost alone with the so-called developed world, industrialized West, in refusing to acknowledge and implement that human rights include healthcare.
And meanwhile, reporting from The Lever, healthcare executives' pay topped $335 million last year, while 100 million Americans were saddled with medical debt. As always, you can go on progressivehub.net, go to any one of our stories see the story, link to the full story, and take action right there on the page. Right now, you can go on Progressive Hub and email your rep and senators to pass Medicare for All, to support this Medicare for All legislation. But yeah, that's probably not enough in its own to get things to the finish line, but it's so important that we keep telling our representatives, like, hey, this is what we support. Please, can we have some health care? According to the legislation, Medicare for All would save $650 billion a year and 68,000 lives. So
yeah, but it's
go ahead,
bad
Norman.
for corporate profits if you had Medicare for All. That's the counterpoint, because so much is built in our political economy on making a few people richer, helping the big stockholders and so forth. This is an opportunity for me to jump in and say that often we see articles, we hear discussions about how bad things are. A really wonderful thing about Progressive Hub, and people find Progressive Hub at progressivehub.net, is that combined with the information and analysis is action. And it can sometimes be a matter of 1 minute or 2 minutes for people to take action. So hats off to the team, Ryan Black, Sam Rosenthal, the editors of Progressive Hub. We really have built that through Roots Action. And I think it's a model for, we're not just seeing what's wrong, we're immediately expressing concrete perspectives and information on what we can do about it.
Right. And I appreciate that very much, Norman. We very much work hard on progressivehub.net. Definitely go there. Check it out every day. 3, 4, 5 new stories a day from the best, most well-known or little-known places you've never heard of. Progressive sources online, dozens and dozens of sources, all compiled to bring you the best, most important stories progressives care most about every single day. Right now, speaking of the Medicare for All, right now I am on Obamacare, the ACA marketplace, and every single year the price goes up. The price goes up. The price goes up. And there aren't really deals to like cover your family or anything like that. So it's a real cluster for us right now. My wife is in the process of at some point being kicked off of Medicaid, which she's been on since COVID when she lost her job. And we have no idea when that's going to happen. We've read horror stories from people in states like Arkansas, where Sarah Huckabee Sanders is kicking people off, that they don't know that they've been removed from the rolls until they go to get their prescription or show up at their doctor's offices, because they're just not keeping people in the loop. And that's one of the major issues right now, is there are still laws required. People have to be given the chance to fight back against getting kicked off the rolls. They have to be given, time and paperwork and opportunities, and they're just not getting that in a lot of places, mostly GOP-led states where they don't care about people at all. So yeah, we're just not looking forward to that happening to us, but it's a matter of time before it happens. So that's the American healthcare system, I guess.
We do have a good option for healthcare in this country to move to Canada, where they do have single payer.
Yeah, or if you're in a union, sometimes union healthcare can be pretty good if you're lucky enough to get into a union. So
unfortunately, the unions and the nurses all endorsed Joe Biden, and so that means we're going to get Medicare for all, because the AFL-CIO and national nurses, they're going to get it for us. So shout out to them.
They're definitely 100% going to get it for us. I don't think so. Okay, well, thank you, Ricci, and thank you, Norman, for joining me this week, and we will talk to you all next week.
Thanks a lot.